She got up and sat next to me on the bed. I looked at her, and that's when she kissed me.
Oh boy, smooching time!
So, I made a mistake. Kinda? I played a game called Gone Home. Sitting at excellent reviews across the board, I assumed it would be a hit for me, but it wasn't, and that's not the game's fault. Gone Home is a narrative walking sim that utilizes environmental storytelling to get its point across. It's a coming-of-age story about identity and first love. You play as Katie, who is coming home and uncovering what her family was up to while she was gone. There is no combat, no real possibility of failure beyond maybe getting stuck at certain points. The core mechanics are reading, observing, and connecting the dots about what's going on through audio recordings, letters, notes, and other documents you find scattered about. The message it's telling builds up over time, and the game wants the player to be patient and willing to make discoveries along the way. Hey, I'm Jen, and welcome to N1 Sitting, the series that explores games that can be completed in 5 hours or less. I generally like to know a game's setting, gameplay, genre, and maybe a few other minor details before playing it just to make sure it's my thing. But outside of some basics, I like to go into games mostly blind, meaning I prefer to know almost nothing about a game before jumping headfirst into it. But that strategy kinda backfired this time. This is largely because I completely neglected to remember its coming-of-age premise, which is entirely on me. My brain works in mysterious ways, and by mysterious, I'm really just referring to the overwhelming ADHD.
Like instantly, I was like, yeah, no.
Anyway, it's always worth discussing a game, whether it was impactful for me or not. So I'd like to talk about why Gone Home wasn't effective for me, who it's really meant for, along with breaking down some of the elements that make Gone Home what it is. Gone Home starts right off the bat. No real pomp and circumstance or lead up. It more or less drops you into the world. I appreciate that element because some games really ramble on when it's not really needed. This game trusts the player to figure it out by themselves, and it's not really that hard to do so. The setting you're given is a large, sprawling house at nighttime, with thunder and lightning going off in the background throughout the entire game. Lights flicker throughout the house in various locations, and to add to this creepy atmosphere, you're entirely alone. One of my first thoughts was, oh, I guess this has horror elements, and I felt that for a short while. My brain started to prepare itself for a jump scare or something, but eventually I realized that the danger wasn't coming.
Psych!
My survival instincts popped up in response to vaguely spooky vibes, and boy did I feel silly. The game basically said, no, you're safe here, and I didn't even pick up on that until like 15 minutes into the game. The game made me think about my own illogical fear of things that aren't scary at all. Thanks, game, and big props to my anxiety for helping with that one. The sense of dread started to fall away, and I started really interacting with the world more thoroughly. I liked the interactable objects and the possibilities, but after I picked up the 3rd container of soap and the 4th can of soda, I started realizing that maybe not every object or interactable was super important to the actual story. Instead, they existed to breathe life into the world and make it feel more believable and lived in. As it turns out, I really didn't need to read the off-brand Dr. Pepper label or open every single drawer. Every time I picked up an item, I asked myself, oh, will there be a key under this? Or I would tell myself that maybe this will have a code for a puzzle later on. Nah, none of that was true. Except for the duck at the beginning. There was definitely a key under that. Despite figuring this out, I never really stopped picking up and interacting with everything. I even messed with a drinking glass by throwing it at the floor, only to be disappointed that it remained in one piece. I'll take the fall for that one though. Despite my silly thoughts, I got involved in the game pretty quickly, and once the initial tension subsided, Gone Home revealed what it's really about. Gone Home's focus is primarily on queer identity through the lens of Sam, a girl discovering who she is and coming into her own. In the game, at one point, she is told that her interest in other girls is just a phase, which has relevance across many issues, even those beyond the concerns of anyone who considers themselves LGBTQIA+. We are so often told by society that who we are is not valid, that what makes us quote-unquote abnormal is something that is fleeting and will fix itself with time. It's framed as a problem to be fixed, not a core part of who we are to be accepted. We know that downplaying or ignoring identity concerns is harmful and completely unhelpful, so representing the struggle in an approachable game is powerful. Representation matters in all facets of life. It validates people's experiences and tells them that, hey, there's nothing wrong with you. We see you. Gone Home's pacing is slow and deliberate, a slow escalation with no stakes. Not having stakes is kind of one of those things you either love or hate. It can make things seem a little boring, or it can make the experience feel meditative and relaxing. Which one it ends up being just depends on what sort of gamer you are. The mechanics of Gone Home matches this pacing. They are consistent by utilizing environmental storytelling such as locked doors, mismatched furniture, posters on the wall, and the many books you find that the dad wrote about JFK's assassination. That's a whole other thing to unpack, frankly. The tone of the games is restrained and subdued. It's an intimate look at people's lives in a domestic setting, and it feels like home immediately. You feel like you belong in the world, or at least I did. There's a sense of cohesion that lends itself to the house feeling lived in and realistic, and even inviting. The graphics help with this. They are very easy on the eyes, even if they aren't super lifelike, but realism in the graphics is not the point. The realism comes across more in the stories of the family members and the depth that comes with them. Speaking of tone, I did experience a tonal shift that put me on my toes halfway through the game. I found a cross in a hidden passage. So I picked up the cross, looked at it for like 2 seconds, and then the light in that area went out. Okay, weird. I tried to turn the light back on, but it stayed dead. Okay, even more weird. I dropped the cross on the ground to open a door, and when I turned around to pick up the cross, it was nowhere to be found. Incredibly weird. I initially wasn't sure if it was intentional or a bug. It was super eerie and was a return to that initial horror vibe. It confused me and made me consider if there were horror elements after all, even though this was halfway through the game. But I think the creep factor was purposeful, because there's a Ouija board you find at one point. I suspect it was connecting all the ghost stuff together, like the summoning table that you find, but I could be reaching. Everything in the game seemed incredibly intentional, so I suspect the cross was meant to disappear. So where did the game lose me, and why wasn't it for me? Well, to start, Gone Home revolves around paying attention to things, remembering details, names, and relationships.
Wait a minute! Who are you?
Unfortunately for me, I'm very bad at remembering just about anything. It took me forever to remember who I was even playing as, even though I literally read Katie's name on the luggage in the very beginning. My brain is a special type of broken that does not mesh well with this game. The combination of my struggle with memory and my general disengagement meant my brain was foggy and disconnected, which made it a lot harder to remember things. When the game was over, I had to look up a lot of things that had me confused, and I realized I missed a lot. In regards to my disengagement, I'll say this. If Gone Home had more complex mechanics, like variation in gameplay, increasing pressure, clear escalation, or anything else that makes a game more dynamic in nature, I might have remembered certain things a little easier. The dynamic nature of many games is what makes the detail in them stick with me. Also, the passive discovery that this game leans on made me feel like nothing was really happening most of the time, even though it kinda was. There is no timer, no danger, no real consequences. Of course, there's nothing wrong with this game not offering those elements. It definitely fits a certain type of gamer. That gamer is just not me. Along with a defective brain, I also don't particularly enjoy coming-of-age stories. I can name maybe one story in that genre that I've liked, and it wasn't even a video game. This fundamental mismatch in my genre preference versus what Gone Home actually is made it harder for me to enjoy my time with the game. The last thing I noticed is that I recognized the themes in this game easily, even the more subtle ones, but I never really felt a connection to them. It's probably because I didn't fully relate to the story, but that's totally okay. Some things aren't meant for me, I know that. Every game has its audience. But lacking that connection meant that the emotional beats didn't really make me feel that much. I listened to the clips, I read the scraps of paper, but none of it really made me feel emotional. As you can tell from my rambling so far, this game isn't a good fit for everyone. Beyond me, hi, I'm the problem, it's me. Players who need continuous or escalating momentum might find the game slow. It also isn't for people who want varied mechanics, as this game is really consistent. Those who do not enjoy putting pieces together as much as you have to in this game might feel frustrated or feel like they've been left hanging. If you need games to be more involved and mechanically engaging, Gone Home might not be your thing. So, okay, we know who it isn't for, but who is it for? I think it's for players who like quiet, reflective stories. For these people, there's a lot of value in Gone Home. Anyone who enjoys figuring out subtext or reading between the lines would find a lot to love here. Figuring things out and piercing things together is the entire point, after all. Those who enjoy environmental storytelling and domestic settings will feel at home, too, literally and figuratively. It's obviously great for people who can relate to the core themes more personally, of course. With the games I play, I like to make a point to highlight how much the game hit me emotionally. This is an entirely personal score that is not indicative of how everyone will feel about it. Keep in mind that it doesn't indicate if the story is important or not either. That said, Gone Home's rating on this scale landed at about a 3 out of 10.
Emotional damage!
The 3 means that I did feel something, but it just wasn't that deep. Most of what I felt resulted from the empathy I have for others going through similar struggles as Sam. Being told your identity is just a phase or being misunderstood or belittled by authority figures, it's horrible, but unfortunately common. It leads to people isolating themselves from their loved ones, especially when they feel that their identity will not be accepted or supported. This is a reality that many people experience daily, and the game does a good job of reflecting this in its storytelling. Also, the game's steady rhythm and slow burn are effective. Not for me personally, but for others. As a side note, I find it interesting that the slow burn wasn't interesting to me because the romance stories I typically enjoy the most are slow burns. So to a certain extent, I can't sufficiently pinpoint why it didn't hit harder. At the end of the day, Gone Home is like a cheeseburger with all the fixings. I don't like onions or tomatoes, but many people do, and that's who Gone Home is for. That said, even with the ingredients I didn't like, it wasn't a nothing burger for me. There was still cheese and mayonnaise and... Okay, wait. I've lost the plot. Let's recalibrate. There were many elements in Gone Home that I might not have liked. This doesn't mean, however, that you won't like it either. And just because it wasn't my cup of tea doesn't mean it isn't yours. The game didn't hit home for me, but it did remind me that coming-of-age stories are not my bread and butter, and that's pretty valuable in itself.
Stop it. Get some help.
Okay, I'm done with the food metaphors, I promise. Anyway, Gone Home asks its player to reflect, and it wants them to meet the game somewhere in the middle, somewhere between hitting you over the head with the message and refusing to tell you entirely. I didn't struggle to understand what the game was saying. I did struggle, however, to actually feel the emotion that accompanied what was being said. That's not the game's fault at all. Rather, it's a mismatch in what I want out of games versus what Gone Home actually offers. Neither of us are wrong. We just aren't on the same page, and that's okay. The game's meaning is very strong, and it holds a lot of value. The game is beautiful and worth playing. It did exactly what it set out to do, and there's something incredibly impressive about writing a game that hits home in the way it was intended to. I want to be clear in saying that I wasn't entirely indifferent or disengaged, but I also want to be honest by saying Gone Home didn't stick with me. I respect the themes and the pain behind the very real narrative. If the things you heard about Gone Home intrigue you at all, then I definitely recommend you give this game a shot. It is very deserving of the score it earned and the acclaim it receives. That's all for now. I'll see you next time, and as always, thanks for sitting with me.